Hello everyone, welcome to the course of Python programming. So far we had the initial classes wherein we covered what a programming language is. We understood how the programming language is used. We understood what are the different types of programming languages, and out of many, one of the programming language happens to be Python, which is quite widely used in the industry, and it's being widely adopted by different communities across the domains. Right. So from this class onwards, we shall be touching upon the each concepts of Python, starting with today's class, which happens to be the basic syntaxes of Python. So before we get into the depth of topics, let's learn the basic nuances of Python, which will help you get started. So what you see on the screen are the few topics that will be covered by this session. We shall start by learning what is identifiers. We shall learn what are the reserved keywords, lines and indentation, multi-lines, user input, and multiple statements and command line arguments. So let's see what an identifier is in Python. Before we learn about what an identifier is, we need to recall that just like we humans talk to each other, this Python language which you are learning, end of the day, it's just a language. It's going to be a medium by which you're going to interact with your machines. And before you can interact, you need to learn the basic grammar of this language, the basic syntaxes of this language. So, if we try to correlate with how we human functions, if I have to tell you guys that please switch on the fan, switch off the TV, you see, I'm retrieving some data from my memory that TV needs to be switched off or there is a fan that needs to be switched off. But if I have to give some instruction to the Python, and if Python or the machine, if they have to perform certain task, they would also need to store the data, to fetch the data from wherever it is stored and print the data, etc. Very basic things, right? But how to store the data in Python? So you see, let's create a variable. For example, I say name, okay, equal to Abhinav. Right. I would say weight equal to 75. School equal to Saint Joseph. City equal to California. What you are observing on the screen, these are like containers, name, weight, school, city, these are like containers. Just like we have containers in our kitchen, you could store sugar in it, you could store salt, you could store some peppers, etc. And these containers act as a storage. The name, the weight, the school, these names we give to name those storage. And Abhinav is a data which is stored in those storage. Uh, to call it a storage is not the right term. Technically, we call it identifier or variable. Why do we call it identifier? Because as you can see, this particular data is being stored in a storage just like anything else. However, when we name it weight, it implies, it conveys that what kind of data it is storing. And that is why, because each of the name that we are giving, they are so meaningful that they identify what kind of data might be stored in it. The city conveys that perhaps there is a city being stored. Weight conveys there is some kind of weight in it, right? And hence we call it identifiers. Remember, whenever we create any storage in Python to store some data, you should always give meaningful name. If I have to store first name, I shall write first underscore maybe name, and this could be Arun. If I have to store last name, I shall write last name Kumar. And if I have to store full name, it shall be first name plus last name. You see, what's happening here is these are the instruction that I'm trying to give to my Python. This is how we write uh, the programming in Python. We learn the basic things, and step by step we keep on building the instruction and we keep on giving to the Python. Starting Python comes from top to bottom, running each instruction that has been given. The very first instruction says the data Arun needs to be stored in first name. For you, it's just a name, first name, but at the background, there is a storage which is being assigned to this container whose name is first name. And similarly, last name is stored in Kumar. And what you see here, this command says in the container or in the variable full name, we need to store this, what is on the right hand side. And what is on the right hand side? It's some kind of computation that is happening. It's the addition, first name plus last name. What happens is Python will fetch whatever is stored in first name and it will fetch what is stored in last name. And then if you try to look into what is being stored in full name, let's try to print it. Okay, this is the structure, the way we print. You can see that both the strings have been added up, right? Now, like I told a short while back, why do we call it identifiers? Because they identify what kind of data is being stored. However, another common name that we call it by is variables. All right. Why do we call it variables? Because if in the first instruction I'm saying store Arun, maybe I can repeat this instruction after a short while. For example, at this point, I shall repeat it here and I say Rohit. Yes. And then if I try to print first name, let's say what is being printed, let's say what is being printed here, it says Rohit. Yes. So when I was here, when I try to print that, what is being stored here, it prints Arun Kumar. But after a short while, when I try to print the same, when I try to tell Python, print whatever is stored in this particular storage or in this container, it prints Rohit. What happened between these two command is there is another command that you're giving that which is actually means to Python that whatever is on the right side should be stored in this container. This container happens to be the same. So what you do is you end up overwriting that data. Okay, you end up replacing that data. Something similar to if you have a container in your kitchen and you have some maybe onion stored in it, and maybe you empty it and perhaps store the tomato. So it's just that the content of that container got updated, right? So this is how we create variables and store data in it. The next thing that I want to tell you is just like we humans, we keep on processing data in our mind, and the data sometimes we retrieve back from our mind, sometimes we hear or see or taste or feel through our senses, and we perceive that as a data, isn't it? So we have a different source of data. In a similar way, if you have to store the data in Python, there are different ways to get the data. For example, if I'm creating a variable called as temperature and I write 22.5, that means I just created a variable temperature and I'm storing 22.5. This method is called as hard coding. Okay, uh, this hash what I've put here, this is not any code. It just means that Python should treat this as a command. However, anything written after hash should be ignored. Okay, this is only for the reference. These are called as comments, just like how you make in your notebook. And if I try to print temperature, you shall see that it gives 22.5. Now, there is another way to get the data. You all would have observed that when we log into the Netflix app or the Instagram or the Gmail, the data is asked to the user to provide. Please enter your email ID or please enter your password, right? So when we are writing a program to run it on the machine, we can also make machine ask user, please provide some data. And whatever user provides through the keyboard, we can store it in our variable. For example, if I say here score, okay, equal to, if I write 25, that means obviously 25 will be scored. But if I write input, so what is input? It's like a inbuilt functionality. It's a built-in functionality which is readily available to you. You should just write input followed by a parenthesis, and within this, if you write some message like please enter your today's score, and next line, let me try to see what shall be stored in score. So I shall print here score. Okay, if I run this, you will see that okay, let me remove this temperature. Let me comment out this. I don't want Python to run this, that is why I have put hashtag here. If I run this, let me comment out here. Okay, so it's asking me, it's giving me a prompt, just the message what we have given it, the same thing is being printed here, the same message, and now an option is being given to me to provide the input. If I write 25 and press enter, you shall see that, oh, I did not print the score, so let me print it also, and now let me run it. If I give 25, you shall see that 25 is being printed. If I give 30, 30 is being printed, right? So what's happening here is the data, we are not giving dynamic like sorry, we are not giving static like 30 or 25. We are not giving in a hard-coded way. Rather, we are utilizing the uh, built-in functionality which is called as input, and we are taking the input from the user and we are storing in the score, and this is what we are printing here. Got it? So I hope it's pretty clear that how we take inputs, how we can hard code the input data. But these are not the only ways to acquire the data. The data could be coming from a server, the data could come from a database, the data could come from an Excel file, the text file. There are a lot of ways to read the data. We shall cover all those things as we move forward in a progressive manner. But for now, let's keep it to this. So what we just learned is how to create a variable, how to store data in it. So this equal sign means assignment. Whatever is on the right side should be assigned to the left side container. All right, perfect. Now let's learn something else. Uh, you have observed that I have been giving some names like temperature and score, isn't it? I have been giving them very meaningful name, but like I said, Python is a kind of a language and you need to know all the rules and grammar so that you can write the instruction in a proper manner and your machine is able to understand it, comprehend it, and follow it. And with respect to this particular topic, that is variables, there are certain rules that you need to know, that how to name a variable. Okay, how to name a variable. So if I have to store some player's name, what can I create? What name can I give to my variable? The storage which is going to store the name of a player. Okay, the very first rule that you have to keep in mind is keep the name meaningful. Okay, for example, if I write name, this is intuitive, it tells that it is storing some name. If I write name, this is also good. If I write player name, this is also right. If I write sportsman name, it's all good. So all these names you can give, not just these, you can give any name of your choice. Even you can give X, you can give Y, but problem is These are very unreadable. By looking at it, people will not get to know, or the person who is reading your code will not get to know what is being stored in it. So you should always name it meaningful. The second is, since you are creating a name to your storage, to a variable, you can use any character between small a to small z. Okay, you can also use any character between capital A to capital Z. And apart from that, you can also use numbers 0 to 9, any numbers you can use. Okay, and of course there is a symbol that is provided to you, that is underscore. You can use this also. So when I say this combination you can use, I can write name, I can write name, this is also valid. I can write name, this is also valid. I can write name 1, I can write name 2, I can write name underscore 3. All these are valid names. Okay, in fact I can write name underscore also, double underscore also. It's all valid because, like I said, you can use any character between A to Z, capital A to Z, and 0 to 9 any number of times at any positions. This being said, let's try to see what is the third rule. The third rule says that do not start the variable name by numbers. What I mean to say is that you can use numbers in your variable, but you should not start your variable name by number. So one underscore name, this is wrong. Python will throw error. Let me write it invalid names. Let me write 2 underscore name or 3 name. All these are invalid. You cannot do that. Apart from this, one more rule to follow is you cannot use special characters in your variable names. Now, what is special characters? I'm pretty sure you all would have seen or come across at some point in your life these special symbols, isn't it? These, right? Including even the space is a special character. You cannot use any of such character except underscore. What is underscore? This. So let me comment it out. So if I try to write name hash, this is invalid. Python will throw error. If I write dollar score, this is also invalid. You cannot use. However, like I said, except underscore, you can use this particular underscore to name your variable. So if I write name underscore, this is valid. Full name, this is valid. So you see I'm using underscore here, but if I try to use doubles, a space here, a special character, you cannot name it, you cannot use like that. It has to be a single entity. Either you keep it joined. If you have to separate for clarity, you can use underscore. That is all. And the last thing that you have to remember is certain special characters or certain special words are reserved, which is called as reserved keywords. Okay, something like if, else, for, while, def. So these are not the just. There are almost 35 words which are not allowed to be used as a variable name. If you look at this slide, uh, give it a quick read here. So here is the definition of identifier. So identifier is just a unique name that we give to any storage which can store any data that we give. And the quick rules that we learned here, what all to keep in mind before you name any variable. Okay, and these are few of the examples of valid identifiers or valid variable names. And like I said, I was talking about certain words which you cannot use while naming your variables. These are these words. okay, and exec, not, assert, finally, or break, because they mean something to Python. Python does a lot of things. It does decision making, loops, definitions, functions, classes. You will eventually learn all these things, but for now, give it a quick look. Going forward, you will not have to by heart it. It will be ingrained in your mind as a muscle memory as you progress through the class. But for a quick reference, these are the words we cannot use. Okay. Yep. Lines and indentation. Okay. I shall come to it uh, and would be used when I take up different concepts, but from the perspective of knowing the basics, let's see what is lines and indentation in Python. Guys, remember that if I am writing here print hello world, and if I'm running this, you see Python is able to follow my instruction. If I'm writing print hope all is well, Python shall honor and follow this instruction and shall print this as well, right? But there are certain times when you might want to print certain block of code and certain line of code you want to miss out. Okay, so how do we tell Python that what to consider executing, what to consider to be run, and what to be ignored? Okay, that's how, when the lines and indentation, the other meaning of indentation you can say is alignment. Okay, helps Python determine uh, which are the different blocks of code. For example, if I write marks scored equal to 85 and I write passing marks is equal to 33. So what I am doing here is I've created a container, or I've created a variable in which I'm storing 85. This equal sign means assignment. Whatever is on the right side shall be assigned to this storage. Okay, if this storage is if this is the first time happening, then this storage will be created and will be named marks code. But if the same thing you do it again, like 100, then Python is already aware. Python already knows that there is a variable that exists by the name marks code, and it shall update 100 to it. Okay, now I'm writing a small code. This is not yet covered, but going forward it will be covering. uh, if I write marks code is greater than passing marks, in that case I shall print congratulations, you passed, continue the good work. Okay, and then I write else, and I write alas, you just missed, better luck next time, right? If you see here, I have both positive news as well as negative news. And like I said, Python is coming from top to bottom, running each instructions. Python has the capability to print this as well and print this as well. However, what to be printed is actually depend upon if the condition is true or not. Okay, whether this assessment is true or not. If it is true, this shall be printed. If it is false, this shall be printed. So if you observe, all the instruction I'm writing in the same line, right? However, this particular instruction, I have given a little space here, and I've written, typically it is almost 4 space equivalent or 1 tab, and I've written here, right? Similarly for else, I have given a space and written here. Now what does this space means? These are called as indentation or alignment. And what it conveys to Python is, wait, do not simply execute them. They belong as a different block of code, and they come under if. Only is the if condition is true, then only you're supposed to run this particular or consider this particular block. Otherwise, if the condition happens to be failure, you're supposed to consider the alternate block. So a spacing here tells Python that there is a different block of or scope of uh, code block existing. We shall learn more about it when we come to it. Uh, but this is a brief introduction. You can give here a quick look. This is what you see in the green is the correct thing. What you see here on the red is not, because here I have aligned everything on the same line. This is wrong. You should give a space which tells Python that this belongs to if, this belongs to else part. All right. Yep. Let's move on. Okay. Multi-line code statement. So guys, I have just written this particular code, right? Typically, Python expects that if you're starting an instruction or if you're starting some command, you should finish it ideally in the same line. For example, this or this, isn't it? But however, sometimes what happens is the instruction may become so long that it is uh, crossing the beyond visible area, or it is not looking pleasant or standard, and you may want to tell Python that I'm not going to write everything here, but I want to shift my instruction, the remaining instruction, to the next line. So how do you do that? You put backslash here and you put enter. So once you put backslash, that tells Python that wait, instruction is not yet over, it is still continuing, and the rest of the instruction you shall fall in the you shall find in the next line, right? If I run this, you see it's passing quite well. But if I remove this indentation, it shall fail because it says invalid syntax. Python is not able to determine if this is a valid syntax or not. And that is why, in case you're shifting the pending instruction to the next line, please put backslash. Okay, this backslash just says that it's not yet over. There's an instruction that is still continuing. All right, so let me run this. Perfect. It's running fine. Yep. So this particular approach is called as multi-line code statement. Going forward, let's learn what is quotation in Python. Okay. Yep. As you all would have known by now that there are certain types of data with Python. So if I'm writing here score equal to 45, that means this is an integer type of data. We call it as integer type data. And remember, integer is just a whole number, just like in mathematics. It could be 50, it could be 500, it could be minus 500, it could be just 0, right? All this is comprises of integer. But when it comes to float, it is the decimal thing, guys. What that means is just like what we call uh, a decimal in normal mathematics, we call it float, the same kind of data in Python. So if I write here temperature and I write here 20.26, this is a type of data is called as float. This is the type that is called as integer. Okay. However, our data may not always be in integer or in float. Sometimes it may be a combination of alphabets. It sometimes may be a combination of alphabets and numbers. Sometimes even it could be a combination of special character. And that type of data is called as string. Okay. Now, how does Python know something is string? Remember, we always put quotes. Anything written in between quotes shall be taken as a single together data, which is a type of string. For example, I write here Bangalore and I try to print this, it shall print Bangalore, right? String need not be a word, it could be a single character also. It can be statement also is a fast rising economy. Okay, you see it's a statement here. Statement is being stored. If I say as of hashtag 2023, you see here there's a special character involved, there's a number involved. If I run this, this is also printing right thing, correct? So like I said, what is quotations in Python? The very first thing is, for Python to know that it is a string type of data, you put a leading quote and a trailing quote. Okay, a code at the beginning of the data and code at the end of the data. And this tells Python that whatever is lying in between is a string type of data. Okay, you can store anything in the string, just the numbers, the mix of numbers and alphabets, and even the special characters. Okay, right. uh, Once we have learned string, uh, the another thing that we need to look at here is what happens if you're creating a content but you're not storing it anywhere. Ideally, Python is going to ignore it. Okay, if I run this, okay, it's a Jupyter notebook. Here there's a different thing it works, but if I go to any online compiler, and it is not going to work. Let me show you to guys. So sometimes if your own compiler or Python setting is not working, you can always come to such websites and run. You see here, if I run this, okay, string is not defined. Let me just put score here. Okay, you see Python has reached from top to here. In the line number 5 it is printing score, but what happened to this particular string? Basically you created data. Okay, you did create data in the right manner, right fashion. However, why is this being ignored then? It is because you are not storing this data anywhere. Python comes down, it sees, oh yes, there is a data, but then what to do with it? You are not telling Python to do anything with it, right? So this shall be ignored. If you want to really store it somewhere for the later reference, you should always store it like this. Okay, or else if your motive was just to print, you can just put print function around it, and this data, this content, is going to print it here. Got it? We are getting two outputs because we are trying to know the two output things here, right? So we also put sometimes we also just write quotations here to act as a comment, like uh, below code is responsible for printing. Okay, something like that. uh, since this data you're creating, it is not going anywhere, neither it is being printed nor it is being stored, it is just acting as a comment. You can make your code look more descriptive, and so that the new user who walks through your code finds it interesting. All right, yep. So let's move on. Now here is comments in Python. Please remember that if I write any word here, everything is Python tries to take the meaning of everything. If I write a here and if I try to run this, it'll give an error, a is not defined, because Python thought that a is perhaps some storage location and some data might be stored. So if I write a equals to 10 and if I try to print a, you shall see that is 10 here, right? So so sometimes you may want that you're writing something, but you don't want Python to treat it like a code. So what you do, you create a comment. Now comment always starts with hash, which ignores. So if I write below code is assigning 10. Okay, this is treated as comment. You can start this comment anywhere, and anything to the right side of this hashtag will always be ignored by the Python. So if I write here, this is print command, you see, if I run this, it works on fine, right? So if you see here on my slide, these are different ways in which you can comment. You can comment at the first line like this, you can comment next to the instruction which you have written, or you can comment all way before. Okay, yep. Going next, user input. So I think we have already learned this, that it is very common, or it's I think very the initial stage wherein you got to learn this on priority, because taking the user input is a very common feature. So how do you take the input? You call the inbuilt functionality. Remember, there is input, there is print, there is len, there is max, there is mid. Remember guys, there are a lot many inbuilt functionality which you can use for your different purposes, but uh, obviously you are going to learn that eventually. However, for now, let's see how do you call input. When you have to call any inbuilt functionality or trigger any inbuilt functionality, you have to write its name. It will always be small, and write parenthesis, open and close. So this is like an actual triggering, okay? And if you want to write any message here, like what is your city? Now what's happening is this function, which is responsible to get inputs from the user keyboard, has also, we have also given some message in between it. What it will do is it will print this message in my town, in my in my arena where I'm coding, and whatever data I'm providing to the keyboard, it shall fetch into the Python environment. But then what do I do with the data which is coming to the Python environment? I shall store it somewhere, like x equal to what is your city. If I run this, you see it's asking for the city. I say Delhi, and it has stored Delhi. Now you are not seeing any further because I'm not doing anything with the data. It's stored and it's kept here, right? So that is what the user input is. It is just an inbuilt functionality to uh, get the user input, right? Let's see what is multi-line statement on a single line. You see, we have been writing so many commands all this while. One thing you would have observed is if I'm writing some command or an instruction, I write that on a same line, and the next line uh, I write the other one like this. Result equals to x plus y. Yes, and if I try to print this x plus y, we shall see the result. One thing if you observe is every instruction that starts in a line also ends in a line. But you see it's taking a lot of space and all. If you try to, if you want to be very efficient, and if you want that a few of the code instructions should be accommodated in the same line, then what you can do is you can put colon, semicolon here, and you can pull up your instruction. Now, what semicolon does is it tells Python that it's an end of one instruction and another instruction begins. So differentiating with semicolon, we can write multiple instructions. It all works same. You see, the answer is coming 70, isn't it? Right, right, guys. Command line arguments you will learn eventually in the coming classes. Um, so just to quickly summarize, what we learned for today's class is that before we start giving instruction to Python or the machine, we would need data within the Python environment, and you have to create the data. You can create the data, and you have to store the data in some way. So we have learned the user input functionality, which is inbuilt, how to extract the data from the user keyboard, from the user, and store it in a variable. We also learned how to create a variable. Yes, we always give a meaningful name to the variable, and there are certain rules you have to follow. Something like you have to name it meaningful. You can use any characters between small a to small z, capital A to capital Z, 0 to 9 numbers, and underscore. However, few things you have to stay cautious while you name your variable. Do not start with a number. Do not use any special characters other than underscore. And last but not least, do not use the keywords which are reserved. Certain keywords which are reserved. The one I showed you at the earlier stage, like this. All right. Yes. So this was the basic gist of how we get started, how we create variables, how we print, etc. All right. Thank you. Further topics shall be covered in the next classes. Right.